Hi there, I'm Chris Fox. Tonight I'm going to talk about my completely unsustainable practice, but perhaps more importantly about artist networks and about how my experience over 16 years of making sculpture and installation has a particular social sustainability or cultural sustainability in the city. So I'm just going to talk about a series of projects, quick whip through on some early projects, and then two projects in particular, and finishing on Salon Jetpack, which is my future proposal for the city. Essentially, over the last, 10 years or so, artist networks in the city I think are essential in terms of firstly creating a different cultural layer to the city. In terms of the way in which the city moves and gentrification forces artist networks or different parts of society out of the urban centres. I think it's crucial to maintain that and to think about a sort of gentrification damming that can happen. My experience has actually come from artist networks and artist-run spaces. So there's artist-run initiatives that throughout the city, and a lot of those spaces I think are crucial and hopefully can be reinserted back into the CBD particularly. There's a few of us who are currently working on future proposals around occupation of buildings in transition stages of development. So there's a lot of opportunity. Fraser Development in the CUB site was able to negotiate that. So there was an opportunity for occupation of buildings that were moving through tenancies. They potentially can be reinserted back into the city. The Dutchies are classic for it with their anti-squat ideas, although that's passed now through new governance. But in principle, there's an opportunity for sort of reinsert insertion of cultural networks throughout the city. So this is a large-scale project in Paris that is a recent project that I've been doing, which is in a data center. So there was a talk earlier that was talking about this idea of decentralizing, and I think this project particularly is an idea around convergence as a broader concept. This was a series of steel pipes that passed through a large-scale data center, and although my carbon footprint alone on this is slightly problematic, the work itself is starting to open up discussions around this idea of a larger convergence that is potentially happening. So I think my current research is looking towards convergence as a notion towards these super cities. So I had a whole series of research and development in a project called Salon Jetpack, following on from perhaps a sort of an idea around how can we firstly push towards a sort of futurist model. And so I developed this whole idea around how and which we could all move throughout the city in a series of jetpacks that style your hair at the same time. So the project basically focused on... Did we lose it? Focused on 5 different styles, and these different styles were essentially mohawk, bob, quiff, afro and ponytail. And the idea was that you would remodel or refashion yourself to be able to traverse the city. So in a way, my sort of futurist or idea about projecting towards the city was this quite absurdist notion around firstly San Francisco as a mapping initiative that was through a sister city biennale that was between Sydney and San Francisco. So there was an idea that each of these different cities would be inserted with a particular style or jetpack. Sydney would get ponytail initially, and the initial idea would be as we started to move towards this idea of convergence, that we'd start to develop a super hybrid city. And the super hybrid city was a mashing of all the sort of larger cities in the world. So this was basically a mix between Paris, London, New York, Sydney, Rotterdam, I think, perhaps even Venice. So each of these networks would have their own particular style, and you would be bound by that. So in a way, I sort of was tying back into this idea of fuel consumption firstly, and this tying back into your style modifier that you would have to then wear. So this was the mohawk, and then through to the afro. And each of these basically became your identity. So I suppose my initial discussion was around how which city networks can change. This is perhaps a little bit demented, the way in which we could traverse the city. But I think there's some tie-ins about how our sort of obsessive with consumer devices or our branding that we are locked into. There's a sort of tie back into this. And I think in a lot of ways, how in which we look at networks and transport and how in which we traverse the city, this project was sort of looking at that as this possible future but possible lost race. So there's this sort of projection into what we potentially desired or what we potentially have lost. So in a way, my practice now is starting to look towards collaborative practice. I think is probably something I'm more and more interested in. And I think in principle, creative networks and the idea of a sort of cultural or social sustainability in the city is crucial. That's my talk. Thank you.